The moment the spirit opens to miracles, the order of peace, imagine for a moment that your mind is placed in a quiet room. No noise from yesterday, no unfinished plans, no conversations you keep replaying. Only a gentle space where your breath becomes slow and your heart softens. In that stillness, I want to invite you to step across a new bridge, not made of wood or stone, but made of calm clarity and a quiet trust rising from within. A trust that does not force you, does not demand anything, but stays with you like a soft stream of light. In my life, I have seen many people chase after miracles, as if miracles were rare guests who appear only a few times and then disappear. But what I have learned is that a miracle is not an event that breaks the rules of life. It is the natural order of life when the mind is placed in its right place. When you put God first, not by words, but through awareness in every thought, miracles stop being surprises. They become the natural rhythm of a soul resting in the right order. I remember a man named David. He lived the way many people live, carrying the weight of having to handle everything alone. He believed that if he did not try harder than others, if he did not stay alert every moment, if he did not hold everything tightly in his hands, his life would collapse. David was not wrong. He was tired, and that exhaustion made his mind like a lake that was always disturbed. And you know moving water cannot reflect anything clearly. One day, when life forced him to pause, David asked me a small question. If I stop controlling everything, what will hold me? The question was simple, but in that moment it brought him to a truth people often forget. I answered him with the simplest thing I knew. You are not the one holding your life together. That has never been your job. What holds you is the principle of goodness. It is the order of God in the universe and in you. When you remember that when you allow Him to stand first in your mind, everything else finds its place on its own. A miracle does not come from effort. It comes from returning to the center, and that center belongs to God. The true nature of life, the outer world, is a mirror of the inner world. There are days when life spins so fast that you feel everything is working against you. Every door feels heavy, every conversation carries a thin layer of tension, and the world outside seems full of chaos. But I want to tell you something simple, something people often overlook because it sounds too simple to be true. The outer world only reflects what is moving inside you. Imagine a lake. In the early morning, when the wind has not risen, the water is flat like a mirror. You can see the sky, the trees, the light reflected so clearly that it feels like another world is resting beneath your feet. But only one small pebble falling in only one breeze passing by, and the water changes. The reflection becomes distorted, blurred, stripped of its original shape. The sky did not change, the trees did not move. Only the surface of the water stopped being still. Human life works the same way. When the waters of your inner world are kept in calm and order, the outer world becomes clear, meaningful, and steady. But when anxiety, tension, judgment, and fear start stirring the surface, you cannot see the truth of life. Everything becomes unclear and twisted. You do not see things as they are. You see them through the ripples inside you. Someone once asked me why a very small thing can make an entire day feel heavy. I said that the small thing does not have that much power. It is because the inner world of that person has already been tense, like a lake before the rain. One touch and everything breaks loose. A woman named Anna once told me she felt attacked by life. She said every day something went wrong. Co-workers were difficult, her children were stubborn, chores piled up, her health declined. She believed the world was against her. But one morning, as we sat in stillness, I asked her a small question. When a tired person looks at life, whose eyes do they see through? The eyes of truth or the eyes of fear? She stayed silent for a long time. And when she looked within, she saw that the only thing truly active in those days was fear of not doing enough, not being enough, not becoming enough. Her mind had been running all day, like an old fan stuck on the highest setting. And when the inside never rests, the outside cannot be calm. The world was not against her. The world was reflecting her unrest. When a person understands this, they stop blaming life and start observing themselves. Not digging for mistakes, but noticing gently. You look at the ripples without judging them. You do not blame yourself for being unsettled. You simply understand that when the water becomes still again, the reflection will return. The beauty is that the world outside does not need to change immediately. When the mind shifts even a little, the whole picture changes. Someone asked me if the outer world is a mirror. What should they do when the mirror reflects something they do not want to see? I told them this: you do not break the mirror. You do not fix the mirror. You adjust the light in the room. When the light changes, the reflection changes. Life is not shaped by the event happening, but by the way you see the event. And the way you see comes from the state of your inner world. When the inner world returns to order, the surface of life will also fall back into place. Remember this: a miracle is not an outside force suddenly interrupting your life. A miracle is the moment your mind returns to order and the world responds to that order. If you change one small thought in a day, your life can change direction. If you shift the tone of your morning, many doors can open. If you change where you place your mind, from fear to peace, from doubt to trust, from gripping to letting go, the sky above you can brighten. When you live with the awareness that the outer world reflects your inner world, you stop fighting circumstances and begin tending to your mind like tending a garden. You do not blame the seed for not blooming. You water it. You pull the weeds. You wait for light. And one day the garden blooms. Life is the same. It does not resist you. It waits for you to be still. And I want to invite you into something small and gentle but powerful. Give yourself a moment each day to ask, am I seeing the world through a calm lake or a restless one? That question alone can soften the waves. And sometimes a little softness is already the beginning of a miracle. Now I want to ask you in this very moment, as you are listening, is your inner world a still surface or a restless one stirred by something you have not named yet? Thank you for being here in this moment. Your presence is part of the healing. When a problem is no longer a problem, dissolving the illusion of fear, there is a truth that people often take a very long time to reach. The problems we see are not the real problems. They are only enlarged shadows of the fear inside. What we call crisis, dead-end loss, is often just the shape that the mind puts on an event. When you look at an event through a layer of fog, everything becomes more frightening. But when the fog lifts, the situation is often not as big as you thought. A woman named Sarah once came to see me in a state of panic. She said that everything around her was collapsing at the same time. An unfinished project, a misunderstanding in the family, an unpaid bill. She saw them as 3 huge stones pressing down on a single chest. And like many people, Sarah believed that to escape that suffocating pressure, She had to fix each stone one by one, push each problem off her path. When I listened to her, I did not talk about solutions. I only asked her one thing. I asked her to tell me what she feared the most. She became quiet. After a few minutes, she spoke in a small voice. "I am afraid that if I do not control everything, it will all fall apart." In that moment, I knew the real issue was not in the project, the family, or the bill. It was in a belief that had never been brought into the light. The belief that life only stands firm if she stretches herself in all directions to hold it up. Human beings tend to see problems as huge, solid entities with destructive power, almost able to decide their destiny. But what few people want to admit is that a problem only becomes that big when we place it at the center. Fear has a very subtle power of magnifying. It turns small matters into big ones, temporary situations into long-term disasters, ordinary hardships into signs of collapse. Like a flashlight held close to the wall, it creates a shadow 10 times larger than the real object. But the wall is not wrong. The object is not really that big. The light is simply shining from the wrong angle. The human mind works the same way. When the light shines on fear, the darkness grows. When the light shines on truth, fear dissolves. The important thing is that the light is always within reach. Some people believe that if they just understand the root cause of a problem, they will be free. But understanding the cause is not enough. You can analyze endlessly, break everything down, ask many people, read hundreds of articles, and still end up back where you started. Because the real problem is not in the event. It is in the story that fear creates about the event. Sarah once believed that if she could just finish dealing with each area of her life, she would feel lighter. But when she tried, she found that for every answer she created for one issue, 3 new worries appeared. It was not because life was cruel. It was because her mind was operating in a state of tension. And when the mind is tense, it sees danger everywhere it looks. This is a truth many do not want to accept. In most cases, people are not struggling with the event itself. They are struggling with the story they keep telling themselves about the event. That story is often written with the lines of worry. I am not enough. I am afraid to be wrong. I am afraid to lose. I cannot lose anything more. When a thought like that is repeated again and again, the problem immediately swells up and covers the whole sky of the inner world. And when it covers everything, a person believes they are facing a force that can change their destiny. But in reality, they are only facing their own fear. The problem itself is not the enemy. It is only a phenomenon. Like a shadow on a wall, it has a shape but no substance. When you turn the light away, the shadow disappears. When you turn your mind away from fear, the problem returns to its true size. And most of the time, the true size is much smaller than you thought. When I explained this to Sarah, she did not believe it right away. People are very used to believing their fear. But after a few quiet sessions, she began to see something important. The things she called problems were really only signals. Signals that her mind needed to be brought back to a quiet state. Like a warning light on a car dashboard that does not appear to say the car is ruined, but to remind you to look inside the system. The mind also has warning lights like that. And we call them problems. When Sarah slowly brought her mind back into order, something interesting happened. The outside events did not disappear at once, but her sense of them changed. What had felt like 3 heavy stones became 3 tasks that needed to be rearranged. What had suffocated her became a list of things to handle one step at a time. And then after only a few weeks, the events themselves began to fall into place. The project was continued because of an unexpected phone call. The family misunderstanding was cleared through a gentle conversation. The bill was handled with help she did not expect. Not because she fought harder, but because the outside world responded to the peace inside. When a problem is no longer fed by fear, it loses its force. When a problem is no longer held at the center, it falls out of that place by itself. When the mind stops magnifying, everything returns to its true size. There is a sentence I always keep with me. The problem does not make you tired. The way you think about the problem is what makes you tired. Once you see this, half of the healing journey has already begun. And now I want to gently invite you to look at your own life. In your life, is there something that has grown large only because you are looking at it through the lens of fear? Is there something that weighs on you only because you believe you must hold everything together by yourself? You do not need to answer out loud. You only need to be honest with yourself. And thank you for being here in this moment to listen to your own heart. You have already come farther than you think. The event changes, but the truth does not. The turning point of a mature soul. Throughout my work with people, I have realized something that every one of us must learn again and again, not once, but thousands of times in a lifetime. It is the difference between what we see and what truly is, between events and truth, between what happens and what never changes. And the distance between these two is what creates most of human suffering. People often believe that events are absolute truth. When a medical diagnosis comes, we think it is destiny. When a relationship cracks, we think it is the end. When finances fall, we think our life is collapsing. But an event is only a temporary expression, constantly shifting with time, context, perspective, and the state of the inner world. Truth, on the other hand, stands still like a compass needle, always pointing north, regardless of rain or storm. I once met a man named Robert, a responsible man, but also someone who became sad easily. When something small went wrong, he immediately fell into heaviness. When I asked him why, he said something I believe represents many people. When something bad happens, I think it says something about me. And because he believed that a small event instantly became a complete truth inside him. It was like a tiny ink mark being seen as if it were spreading across the whole page. I explained to Robert that there is a very common confusion in the human mind. The confusion between what is happening and who you are, between outer conditions and inner essence. When these two are mixed together, a person begins to believe that what they experience is their identity. And in that moment, they lose the power to change. Imagine life as if you were holding a compass. Whether you stand in a forest, on a mountain, or on a beach, the needle always points in the same direction. It does not need your belief or your reassurance. Truth is the same. It does not shift with your emotions. It does not weaken when you face hardship. It does not change when you are tired, worried, or discouraged. Truth is the unchanging nature of life, the goodness that always exists, the wisdom that always flows, the creative force always ready within you. And when you remember this, the outer events immediately fall back into their proper place. A crisis is no longer destiny. A failure is no longer a verdict. An obstacle is no longer a sentence. They are only temporary ripples on the surface of a lake. Many people do not suffer because of the event itself, but because of how they interpret the event. An overdue bill becomes not just a number, but an accusation. A disagreement becomes not just a difference in views, but a sign of personal inadequacy. A small mistake becomes not just an error, but a prediction of failure. But all of this is just the story the mind writes. It is not the truth. Notice how events behave. Something can happen in the morning, and you may see it as the worst thing in your life. But a few hours later, when your mood shifts, it suddenly does not feel so terrible. A few days later, you may even laugh about it. This alone proves that the event has no fixed nature. The only constant is the movement of the mind. Truth does not depend on the event, but the event is always pulled in the direction of your inner state. I told Robert that what he needed was not to change the outside, but to change where he stands inside. When he stands on the foundation of the truth, that life is good, wise, orderly, and full of vitality, the outside no longer has the power to define him. When he stands on truth, the wind may be strong, but he does not fall. The rain may be heavy, but he does not drown. And from that place he can see everything in the light of what it actually is. Robert asked me how to know whether he was seeing something through truth or through fear. And I told him there is one simple sign. If what you see makes you tighten, shrink, or become smaller, that is not truth. Truth always opens you. Truth always makes you lighter even before the event changes, because it separates you from the old interpretation. Remember this. An event can confuse you for a moment, but truth helps you breathe again. An event may demand action, but truth makes you calm enough to act wisely. An event can change by the hour, but truth does not change no matter where you are or what you face. When a person becomes truly mature, they learn to stand with truth before reacting to the event. They are not swept away by every shift. They see things through the eyes of a clear inner world. They stop searching for answers in the waves and start finding them in the still water beneath. And the miracle is that once they stand there, the events themselves begin to align in the most wholesome way. To help Robert experience this, I asked him to do one small thing. Every time something happened, whether a message, a call, a task, or a harsh comment, he had to ask himself one question. Is this the event or the truth? He practiced this for a week, and after only a few days he saw that the change was not in the world outside. It was in how he entered the world. He no longer magnified everything. He no longer added negative meaning to every situation. He began to see things clearly as they were. And when he stood firmly in truth, the events began to change too. Not by mystical magic, but by natural order. When the inside becomes bright, the outside reflects that brightness. Now I want to gently invite you to ask yourself, the last time you felt sad, disappointed, or worried, what weighed on you more? The event or the way you thought about it? Your answer may be the first step in leading you back home to the truth within you. And that is the moment when the miracle begins. The power of attention, what you are feeding. After many years observing human life, I have realized a gentle but powerful truth. Everything in life grows because it is fed. A seed grows because you water it. A wound grows because you keep touching it. A fire grows because you keep adding wood. And a problem grows the same way. It does not grow because it is strong by nature. It grows because you keep feeding it with your attention. People often do not realize the power of attention. They think attention is something small inside the mind, something that does not create much impact. But attention is like water. Wherever you pour water, that place becomes wet. Wherever you place your attention, that thing begins to live inside you. And when it lives long enough, it becomes a pattern, then an atmosphere, then a reality. I once told a woman named Laura that if she kept thinking about her fear every day, she was turning that fear into a living entity. Laura had a beautiful heart. She wanted good things for everyone, but she lived with a constant anxiety that everything could fall apart at any moment. She worried about work before anything went wrong, worried about her children before anything happened, worried about her health before any real sign appeared. And every worry over time became a small flame. The more she looked at it, the bigger the flame grew. One day I placed a small seed in Laura's palm. I asked her what would happen if she watered this seed every day. She said it would sprout, and if she watered it even more, it would become a plant. And if she spent time tending to it every day, it would become a garden. I looked at her and said softly, "Your fear works the same way." She stayed silent for a long time. For the first time in her life, she saw something she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. Her fear was never big from the beginning, but because she watered it every day by thinking about it, talking about it, analyzing it, imagining it in every possible scenario, it had grown into a tree in her mind. And she felt small in front of it. Attention is the invisible nourishment. What you focus on will become what you live with. If you give your attention to kindness, it will multiply. If you give your attention to light, it will grow in your inner world. But if you give your attention to something that scares you, then even if it is as small as a grain of dust, it can grow into a storm. Someone once asked me how to know what they are feeding. I told them to simply observe what makes them tired, what occupies their mind the most, what makes their body tense, what they mention to others often. That is where their attention is, and that is what is growing in them. The interesting thing is that people often believe they are solving a problem when they think about it constantly. But the truth is the opposite. You do not solve the problem by thinking about it. You are watering it. A problem does not need more thinking. It needs more light. And that light comes from shifting attention toward goodness, order, and the presence of God. I once guided a man named Matthew to try a simple experiment. Every time his mind began spinning around a worry, he had to pause and ask himself, "What am I watering right now?" At first, it felt strange because the human mind does not like to be watched. It loves following the momentum of fear. But after a few days, he realized something surprising. He realized that most of the time the problem was not growing on its own. He was the one blowing air into it. And when he began shifting his attention away from fear and toward goodness, something inside him changed even before his circumstances changed. This did not come from forcing himself to be positive. It came from not feeding what was negative. When you stop watering weeds, they wither. Many people think that to change their life, they need to do something big. But real change often comes from one small decision. The decision to place attention in the right place. The decision not to see the problem as the center of everything. The decision not to repeat an old story in the mind. The decision to give light to what brings even a little peace. Because when you change the direction of your attention, you change the direction of your life. This is not magic. It is the law of the mind. The mind is a creative tool, and wherever it points, life begins to grow there. Some people spend weeks trying to fix a problem they created in 5 minutes of worry. But when they learn to stop looking at what scares them and begin looking at what is good, sometimes within hours their feeling changes. Not because the problem disappeared, but because they stopped feeding it. If you want to know what is living most strongly in your inner world, ask yourself, what am I watering? Your answer will lead you back to the true nature of life, that not everything deserves to be fed. Not every worry is worthy. Not every thought deserves a place inside you. You get to choose where your attention stays. And that choice is the beginning of peace. And now, if you feel ready to place your attention on something brighter, lighter, and more aligned, I invite you to leave a simple note. I am ready to change. Or simply the number 1. As a quiet affirmation that you have begun. The key that changes your direction, turning away from the problem and turning toward what is good in the spiritual journey of a human being, there is a very special moment, when everything begins to shift. It is not when you finally solve all your difficulties. It is not when life suddenly becomes smooth. It is the moment when you choose to turn your mind away from the problem and toward what is good. That moment may last only a few seconds, but its power can touch your entire life. People often believe that to escape trouble, they must push hard against it, analyze more, think deeper, try stronger. But the more they do that, the heavier the problem becomes. It is like trying to push a door in the wrong direction. The harder you push, the more it locks. Not because the door is too strong, but because you are using the wrong principle. A problem is not solved by fighting it. A problem is released when you stop giving your mind to it. Imagine you are in a room with 2 windows. One opens to a sky full of gray clouds. The other opens to sunlight spreading across the ground. Both views exist, but the view that enters your mind depends on which window you stand before. If you stand at the window facing clouds, even if the sunlight outside is beautiful, you will only see the gray sky. But if you step toward the other window, you immediately see a different world. The world has not changed. You have changed direction. The golden key works exactly like this. It does not tell you to chase away the clouds. It does not tell you to fight the darkness. It simply asks you to step toward the window of light. In practice, this means stop imagining what you fear and start imagining what is good. Stop analyzing what scares you and start remembering what you trust. Stop building stories of failure and start building an inner image of order, peace, and the goodness of God. A man named Joseph once told me he had tried everything to escape the anxieties that were weighing him down. He read books, listened to encouragement messages, made notes, created lists, tried to control every part of his life. But the more he tried, the more trapped his mind felt. Every attempt to fix the problem tightened the problem even more. He said he felt like he was swimming in a whirlpool, and the more he struggled, the deeper he sank. I explained to Joseph that the principle of the spiritual life is the opposite of the mechanism of fear. Fear tells you to fight. Spirit tells you to turn. When you confront what you fear, you are feeding it with your energy, attention, and creativity. But when you turn your mind toward the presence of God as the source of goodness, you withdraw energy from fear and place it into order. Where your attention rests, power gathers. When you change the direction of your attention, you change the gravitational center of your life. I asked Joseph to practice one small exercise for 1 week. Every time his mind began circling around a worry, he had to pause for 1 second and ask silently, "Which window am I facing?" Only that one question. A question as small as a breath, but enough to remind him that he has the right to choose the space of his inner world. And with each time he asked the question, he gently shifted himself toward the window with light, toward goodness, toward order, toward the quiet center. Not by forcing, but by remembering that light has always been there. After a few days, Joseph told me that fear no longer swept him away the way it used to. The interesting thing was that nothing in his circumstances had changed. No good news. No sudden breakthrough. But he felt a small movement inside, like a boat caught in a whirlpool, suddenly catching a calm current and drifting to quieter waters. And once his mind stopped resisting the solutions he could not see before began to appear. Not because he searched harder, but because the surface of his inner world became calmer, clear enough to reflect truth. The golden key works on a simple but profound principle. Wherever you place your mind is where your spiritual energy begins to operate. If you place your mind on what is bad, you increase its strength. If you place your mind on what is good, you create room for goodness to grow. You do not need to fight darkness. You do not need to defeat it. You only need to turn on the light. Turning your mind toward God is not a ritual or a magic phrase. It is a choice. A choice to lean toward light instead of shadow, toward peace instead of anxiety, toward truth instead of misinterpretation, toward goodness instead of fear. Each choice is small, but each choice opens a way. Some people say they cannot do this because their problem is too big. But I tell them that the bigger the problem feels, the more urgent it is to change direction. You cannot escape a whirlpool by swimming with the swirl. You escape by shifting your angle and letting the calm current pull you out. In your life, there may be something heavy right now, a layered worry, an old memory, a situation standing still right at the edge of uncertainty. But whatever it is, you can choose your mind again in this very moment. You may not change the whole circumstance right now, but you can change where you place your inner energy. And the moment you change direction, the entire structure of the problem begins to reorganize itself. The golden key reminds you that you do not have to move the whole world. You only need to move your mind toward the right direction. The rest will be handled by order itself. The sun does not need your belief to rise. Goodness does not need your worthiness to work. It only waits for you to return. And right now, if you want, you can try something simple. Ask yourself, which window am I standing before? And if you realize you are facing the one with clouds, gently step to the one with light. No forcing, just turning. The true nature of spiritual practice, no ritual, no complexity. Many people misunderstand the spiritual life. They believe that to come close to peace, they must follow many rituals, create sacred spaces, memorize long prayers, sit in the perfect posture, or do something grand. They believe connection with God happens only in special moments, special places, or through special people. And that belief itself takes them far away from the simplest truth. The sacred is not inside the ritual. It is inside the intention of the mind. One day, a man named Alan told me he had tried many methods to keep his peace. He meditated, read books, went to church, practiced breathing exercises, listened to calm music, made new plans, and then abandoned them all. He said he was not disciplined enough. He was not patient enough. And he felt like he had failed, even in the search for peace. I looked at him for a long moment and said something I believe many people need to hear. Peace does not ask you to be perfect. It only asks you to return. The golden key rests on a very gentle principle. Not doing more. Not trying harder. Not concentrating longer. Simply turning your mind away from what is wrong and toward what is right. Every spiritual practice operates on this law. Rituals do not create connection. Truth in the mind creates connection. You can be standing in the kitchen washing dishes, your hands still covered in soap, And with 1 second of remembering that goodness surrounds you, your mind reconnects. You can be walking down a noisy street, and with one breath turned toward the presence of God, your heart becomes brighter. You can be sitting in your office in front of a pile of documents, and with one soft exhale, whispering God is here, your mind shifts direction. No ritual can replace this truth. No outer structure is stronger than the quiet action of the inner mind. Many people believe that spiritual practice must come with emotion, that if they do not feel moved or touched or lifted, then they are not doing it correctly. But emotion does not decide the spiritual. Emotion is only a wave. Truth is the water beneath it. The golden key does not require you to feel anything special. It only asks you to change direction. Its power does not lie in emotion. It lies in principle. When you think of God, you align yourself with order. Whether you feel it or not, order is still at work. Just as sunlight shines, even when you are standing in the shade, you do not need to feel the warmth for the light to be real. A woman named Mary once told me that each time she practiced the golden key, she felt like she was acting like her mind did not believe what she was saying. She said she felt nothing, like she was repeating words mechanically. I told her that what she felt was far less important than what she was doing. The mind may resist at first. It may be unfamiliar. It may try to pull you back into old patterns of fear. But in that moment you are planting a seed. Emotion does not define the value of the seed. The persistence of planting does. Spiritual practice is not the expression of a feeling. Spiritual practice is placing the mind in the right position. When you turn toward goodness, connection happens even if the mind still trembles. When you remember the presence of God, order moves, even if your heart has not calmed yet. When you turn your mind toward light, darkness loses its place, even if you still see its outline. The golden key is not a method of avoiding reality. It is not a tool to hide your emotions. It is the act of bringing the mind back to where it belongs. It reminds you that the essence of truth is not inside what you fear. It is inside the principle of goodness. It reminds you that what is noisy in your life is not truth. It is only surface water. Truth is the deep lake beneath. You do not change your life through ritual. You change it through recognition. You do not need to change everything outside. You only need to change the direction of your mind. And once you change direction, everything else begins to adjust naturally. Imagine you have a small button inside your mind. A quiet reset button. Every time you feel anxious, tense, confused, or afraid, you can press that button. That button is the golden key. It makes no sound. It shines no light. It does one thing. It brings you back to truth. And the miracle is that every time you return to truth, life rearranges itself gently around you. Some people say they do not have time for spiritual practice. But the golden key does not take time. It plays with time. You can use it in a breath, in a moment, in the 3 seconds between tasks. It requires no preparation, no setting, no perfection. It only requires one thing: your mind choosing the right direction. If you look closely, you will notice that the moments that brought you the deepest peace in life never came from ritual. They came from remembering, from recognizing, from releasing, from a single breath, from a simple thought, from 1 second of returning to center. And that 1 second is enough to open again the well of peace you thought you lost. The golden key is a reminder that you do not need to go anywhere to find peace. You only need to return to where peace already is, and you can do that anytime you want. Stillness, the room where order is restored. There are moments in life when what you need is not another solution, another conversation, another analysis, another piece of advice. What you need is a quiet room. That space is not always a physical room. Sometimes it exists inside your mind, right behind all the thoughts rushing through. That inner room is where spiritual order returns, where the noise of worry becomes small, where you do not have to try to become anyone other than yourself. I remember one quiet afternoon in an empty library. The late sunlight fell across the wooden table in long golden lines. Everything in the room was so silent you could hear the soft rustle of pages touching each other. I turned a page of the book in front of me and felt something all of us have experienced at least once in life. A moment so still that you can hear yourself think. But what made that moment special was not the outer quiet. It was the inner quiet, a quiet untouched by noise, a quiet created not by circumstances, but by the mind releasing its grip. Inner stillness is a form of strength many people forget they have. When your mind becomes still, even for a few seconds, you step into a level of awareness where only truth can be heard. All the voices of fear, panic, judgment, and doubt stop at the doorway. They cannot enter the quiet room, because that room belongs to God. We humans are used to reacting to everything. One message can make your day heavy. One glance can shake your sense of worth. One decision can move you from calm to anxious within minutes. The mind behaves like a small boat on the ocean, leaning with every wave. But in the words of the Psalms, there is a quiet instruction. Be still and know that I am God. That is not a moral command. It is a spiritual direction, gentle but powerful enough to shift an entire inner landscape. Be still and know. When you are still, you stop the unnecessary movements of the mind. You stop chasing every thought. You stop letting emotions drag you like wind pushing a leaf. You pause and observe. And when you observe, you see what you could not see before. That truth is not inside the event happening. Truth is inside what does not change. Truth is not inside what you fear. Truth is inside the goodness placed within you. Truth is not inside the storm. Truth is inside the center that cannot be moved by the storm. Someone once asked me how they could be still when their heart was full of worry. And I told them that stillness does not come from forcing yourself to be quiet. Stillness comes when you release what you are holding too tightly. When you release control, the mind becomes calm. When you release the belief that everything must follow your plan, the mind opens. When you release the fear that if you stop worrying, something terrible will happen, the mind makes space for what is good. Stillness is not a heroic act. It is simply the decision to stop resisting life. A man named Henry once told me that every time he worried, his mind felt like a room where everything fell at once. Things crashing, noise everywhere. He would run from one thing to another, trying to pick up, fix, and organize. But the more he tried, the more chaotic the room became. One day, exhausted, he just stopped. No cleaning, no fixing. He sat down and became quiet. In a few short minutes, he realized something he had never seen before. The room did not need to be cleaned before he could find peace. He needed to find peace first. And from that peace, things naturally began to fall back into place. Stillness does what effort cannot. It stops the mind long enough for you to see that what you fear is not as powerful as you thought. It softens emotion enough so you do not react from fear, but from truth. It relaxes the body enough for natural wisdom to rise. When you are still, you do not lose control. You regain the ability to lead yourself. I want you to remember that stillness does not require long hours. It only requires presence. You can find stillness in 3 minutes standing in a hallway, in 1 minute sitting on a chair, in a few seconds of slow breathing before answering a call. Stillness belongs to you, not to the environment. It is the inner room you can enter any time you choose. To feel the strength of stillness more clearly, try a simple practice. Once a day, pause for 3 minutes. Do not try to push thoughts away. Do not try to reach a special state. Just breathe softly and whisper inwardly. Be still and know that I am God. Say it once. Let it settle into your chest. Even if you do not feel anything unusual, it is already working. Because spiritual laws do not operate through emotion. They operate through truth. The surprising thing is that when you begin practicing stillness, the things that once seemed tangled start becoming clear. Choices that once confused you become easier to see. Emotions that once drained you become lighter. Not because you became a different person in a day, but because you opened the door to the room where light has always lived. And when light enters, darkness slowly disappears. The quiet guide, the inner voice that has always been there. There are moments in life when the outer world becomes so tangled that you no longer know which way to go. People often say they need a sign, a direction, a voice from somewhere to tell them whether to move forward or stop. And what has troubled me for many years is that people keep searching for signs outside while the clearest voice is already speaking inside them, soft, pure, close, but often hidden beneath the noise of worry. In the teachings of the Spirit there is a truth many have heard but never truly listened to. Every person has an inner center of guidance, a point of stillness and clarity stronger than any external advice. Scripture calls it the presence of the one who is with you. I call it the gentle voice inside the voice that never shouts, never rushes, never threatens. It only invites. A woman named Caroline once told me she kept making wrong decisions. She said she did not know why, but every time she faced a choice, she could not hear what she truly needed to do. She felt lost inside her own story. I looked at her for a long moment and asked, "When was the last time you truly listened to yourself?" She lowered her head and whispered, "I do not remember." Sadly, many people are like Caroline. They listen to fear more than to their own heart. They hear pressure more than truth. They hear assumptions, predictions, opinions, old memories far more than the quiet invitation of inner guidance. And then they are surprised when life feels heavy, chaotic, or directionless. But what they do not know is that the inner voice never disappears. It is only buried under too much noise. I explained to Caroline that spiritual guidance is nothing like a horn or a ringing phone. It does not arrive in a way that startles you. It is like the thin line of light under a door in a dark room. You do not see the whole sky, but you see enough to know light is on the other side. Sometimes it comes as a feeling of quiet, a lightness when you think of one choice, a tightening when you think of another, a sense, a knowing without logic, a step you feel drawn to take even if no one advises you. Guidance is not loud. It is honest. It does not push you. It opens the path. When people stay close to fear, they lose the ability to hear. When they return to stillness, that ability opens again. It is like a radio. Tune it wrong and all you hear is noise. Tune it right and the sound appears clearly. The broadcast did not just begin. It was always there. You simply were not aligned with it. One evening, Caroline came to me calmer than usual. She told me she had a strange experience. Sitting in her living room with the lights off, no phone, no music, she felt herself entering a deep quiet. No words came, but she suddenly knew that what she feared was not as dangerous as she thought, and what she needed to do next was not to solve everything at once, but to take one small step. Just one. That step did not erase her worry, but it stopped her from being paralyzed. It was a kind of gentle guidance, like someone placing a hand on her shoulder saying, "Walk this way first." I told her that was the inner voice. It brings no commands, no promises, no demands. It only shows you the next step, and the next step is always enough. What makes people feel lost is not the lack of guidance. It is the belief that guidance must be loud, dramatic, or prophetic. But spiritual guidance often comes in the simplest form. A sense of peace when thinking about one direction. A sense of discomfort when thinking about another. A small reminder inside. A gentle thought you tend to ignore because it seems too simple. But simplicity is often the clearest sign. If you want to hear guidance, you do not need to do anything strange. You only need to create a quiet space, because the spiritual voice does not enter when the mind is full of noise. It speaks when you are quiet enough to notice. When you become still, you step into the space where truth reveals itself. Not because truth arrives when you call it, but because you stop long enough to see it was always there. Someone once told me they were afraid of hearing wrong, afraid they could not tell the difference between the real voice and the voice of fear. I told them there is a clear sign. Fear always pushes you into urgency. Truth always slows you down. Fear says, if you do not act now, you will lose everything. Truth says you can breathe first. Fear tightens you. Truth opens you. Fear scatters the mind. Truth brightens it. A person hears truth not because they are skilled, but because they are still. Maybe what you need right now is not a brilliant solution or a perfect answer, but simply a quiet moment to hear yourself again. Because inside you for a very long time there has already been a quiet guide, a voice that never goes out, a light that never dims, a direction that is never wrong. And sometimes everything begins with a simple question. At this very moment, deep inside you is something trying to speak, but you have not dared to listen. Thank you for being here in this moment. Your presence makes this journey of healing far more meaningful. The persistence of the mind, the path I have walked, looking back on my long journey, I realized there was a quiet strength that carried me through every season. Not talent, not knowledge, not some special stroke of luck. What lifted me through the deepest years of my life was the persistence of the mind. A gentle persistence, not loud, not forceful, but steady, like a stream of water that with time can soften even the hardest stone. There were seasons when everything felt like it was working against me. Days when I woke up and felt like I had to brace myself from the first moment. Nights when sleep would not come because my mind refused to settle. Moments of standing in a crowd yet feeling painfully alone, as if all light had quietly slipped away. And I know you have had days like that too. We all have. In those dark spaces I tried to escape by sheer effort. I analyzed, reasoned, planned, organized. I tried to force my mind to change through willpower. But the more I pushed, the more exhausted my mind became. And one evening, sitting alone in my small room, I realized something simple that I had ignored for years. The mind does not need to be forced. It needs to be guided. And that guidance begins with something very small. The steady turning toward what is good. You may not see results immediately. You may hear the right words, but not believe them yet. You may speak of goodness, but still feel fear. You may try to direct your mind toward order, but feel the chaos lingering. But what matters is not the feeling of the first day. What matters is the consistency you return to day after day. I have watched many people collapse not because the problem was too big, but because they gave up too early. They think that if the practice does not work instantly, it is not for them. But the spiritual life does not operate with instant results. It operates like the law of planting. You sow a seed, you water it, you wait for light, and the seed sprouts in silence. It does not break through the soil in one morning. It grows quietly, slowly in the dark, until one day it rises, carrying with it all the days you were patient. I learned that each time I turned my mind toward God, even for 1 second, my mind aligned itself slightly more in the right direction. And when repeated enough times, that direction became a path. The path became a habit, and the habit became a nature. Slowly, my mind learned not to shrink before fear, but to open toward truth. Not to run after chaos, but to pause and listen for something deeper. Not to react from instinct, but to respond from peace. One day I realized that the things that once frightened me now could only touch the surface of who I was. They no longer reached the deeper places. Not because life became easier, but because my mind had grown a new endurance, a kind of spiritual muscle. And that muscle was built from the persistence I once underestimated. A man named Stephen once asked me how he could fully trust the golden key. He said he tried, but his mind kept doubting. I answered him from my own experience. I did not trust the golden key after one day. I trusted it after watching my life change in quiet, small ways. I trusted it after noticing that every time I turned my mind toward goodness, an old piece inside me loosened. An old habit weakened. A new way of thinking took its place. Faith does not come from a moment. It comes from repetition. There were days when I practiced, but my mind stayed loud. Days when my heart did not hear what I was saying. Days when worry still lingered, even though I knew I was facing the right direction. But what kept me going was the understanding that goodness wins if I persist long enough. It does not win with force. It wins with steadiness. People often judge themselves by how they feel on one day, but the spiritual life is not measured by emotion. It is measured by endurance. A person may feel weak, but still stay consistent. They may feel tired, but still return to what is good. They may feel afraid, but still choose to trust. And those consistent choices create a strength greater than any crisis. When I look back, I see clearly that every time I chose goodness over fear, I was forming a trail in my mind. That trail always led me back to center. And when a trail is walked enough times, it becomes the main road. The mind no longer struggles to find peace. It knows the way. This is why I say, persistence is not just a virtue. It is a miracle. It turns what you practice into who you become. It does not make you strong in a day. It makes you steady for a lifetime. And now, as I say this to you, I want you to know that it does not matter how far you feel you have wandered. It does not matter how tangled your mind feels. It does not matter how many doubts you carry. The only thing that matters is the next moment you choose to turn toward what is good. Just one moment, and then the next, and the next after that. Each moment is a step on the path I walk, a real path, a path strong enough to carry you to sharing light. The more you give, the more you receive. In the spiritual life, I have learned a rule that is gentle but profound. When you share what is good grows within you. When you lift someone with a bright thought, your own light rises a little. When you offer trust, your trust strengthens. When you speak a word aligned with truth, truth becomes more rooted in you. You lose nothing when you give. You expand. A man named Daniel once told me he wanted to keep his spiritual journey to himself. He feared that if he shared it, he would be judged or misunderstood. He feared people would not believe him or accept him or worse, mock what he had discovered. I listened and smiled. I understood that fear. Many people carry it. But I told him something I believe is true for every journey. Light does not fade when it shines. It becomes clearer. You do not need to teach anyone. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to be a guide or a mentor. Sharing is not standing on a stage and speaking loudly. Sharing is living. Living in such a peaceful way that people notice. Living so gently that people feel something different around you. Living without fear so deeply that your very presence becomes a reminder. I once witnessed something beautiful. A person entered a room without saying a word, yet the atmosphere changed. Not because they were powerful, not because they were impressive, but because they carried a kind of quiet, a kind of clarity, a kind of inner order that others could feel even if they could not describe it. They shared light without speaking. They shared it by being. A woman named Olivia once came to me, completely exhausted. She said she tried to help her close friend through a crisis, but the more she tried, the more drained she became. She gave advice. She encouraged. She analyzed. But her friend did not improve, and she was nearly empty. I looked at her and said, "Perhaps what you shared was not light. Perhaps what you shared was the fear behind your desire to save them." People often confuse sharing with intervening. Sharing is offering light. Intervening is trying to rearrange someone's life. Sharing is light. Intervening is weight. When you share the right way, you do not feel tired. When you intervene, exhaustion comes quickly. Olivia asked how she could share correctly. I told her the key was in her own presence. If her heart was anxious, afraid, tense, then what she offered would carry the same energy. But if her heart was calm, ordered, clear, what she offered would be light. People learn more by watching than by listening. They learn from how you enter a room, how you breathe, how you react, how you choose not to argue, how you hold quiet in chaos. When you are peaceful, you do not need to speak about peace. Peace spreads by itself. There is something beautiful in the spiritual journey that I am always grateful for. Every time I share something wholesome with someone, it comes back to me stronger. When I tell someone that truth inside them is greater than fear, I remember it too. When I remind someone that they are being guided, I am reminded as well. When I tell someone to return to goodness, I step one more inch into goodness myself. Sharing is not giving away what you have. Sharing is reinforcing who you are becoming. One day a young man asked me, "Are you ever afraid to speak about these things?" I smiled and said, "Yes." But then I remember that the light does not belong to me. I am only carrying it. My role is not to protect the light. It is to let it shine through me. And when I understand that, the fear disappears. I want you to know that every step you take on this journey has value. No step is small. When you say a gentle word to someone who is hurting, the light in you grows. When you offer a peaceful word to someone who is afraid, your own peace deepens. When you remind someone that they are strong enough to rise, you hear that reminder inside yourself too. Sharing is not a duty. It is a joy. Not the loud joy of showing off, but the quiet joy of someone who has found light and naturally wants that light to touch another life. And if you think you are not ready to share, remember this. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to be sincere. Sincere in the peace you are building. Sincere in the kindness you are practicing. Sincere in the transformation you are walking through. People do not need you to be flawless. They need you to be real, and that alone is light. Now, if you have reached this point and feel something inside you shift, even as softly as a breath, I invite you to leave a simple comment. I am ready to change, or simply the number 1. That sign is not for me. It is for you. A small affirmation that you are ready to step into the brighter part of your life. Living in the order of goodness, when peace becomes the way you walk there, is a phase in a person's spiritual journey that I often describe with a very simple word. Stability. Not the stability the world talks about. Not stability because work is smooth, family is calm, finances are steady, or life is going your way. But an inner stability, a steadiness that does not depend on circumstances, a peace that does not need proof, a quiet that does not need conditions. When someone practices the golden key long enough, they arrive at this place. Not by effort, but by change. Not because they become someone new, but because they become more of who they truly are. The mind was made to live in the order of goodness. It only gets disturbed by fear, pulled into false interpretations, and overwhelmed by the noise of living. When that noise softens, you begin to see the natural state of the mind. And that state is peace. I once observed the change in a man named Andrew. When I first met him, he carried an inner wind that never stopped blowing. You could not see it, but you could feel it in how he stood, how he spoke, and how he breathed. He was always preparing to fight, to defend, to fix, to avoid something. As if life were a difficult puzzle he always had to be ready for. I asked him when he last felt peace. He answered instantly, "When I was a child, when I did not yet know how many things could go wrong." His words made me quiet for a long moment, because I knew he had spoken something millions of people feel but cannot name. Peace never left. It was simply buried under too many thoughts that do not belong to us. After a few weeks of turning his mind toward goodness, Andrew began to change. It was not dramatic. It was subtle. He said he no longer woke up feeling like he had to prepare for battle. Everything was still the same. Work was still demanding. Family still required care. But he was no longer pulled in every direction at once. He chose the first task of the day with more softness. He breathed slower. He moved slower. And strangely, life began to respond to his slowness. When your mind slows, your life becomes less urgent. This happens not because the world changes, but because the way you see it changes. When you live from the order of goodness, you no longer interpret everything through fear. An email is no longer a threat. A delay is no longer a warning. A careless comment is no longer an attack. When fear is no longer the filter, the world softens. People are tired not because reality is too heavy, but because they read reality with the voice of anxiety. When peace becomes your starting point, everything shifts. You no longer chase life. You walk with it. Not running. Not avoiding. Not bracing. You walk like someone who knows there is an invisible order beneath every event. That order does not belong to humans. It belongs to God. And when you remember you are living inside that order, you naturally stop carrying the burden of holding everything together. I asked Andrew after 3 months what had changed the most. He did not talk about work or family or circumstances. He simply said 4 words. I am not rushing anymore. To me, that was one of the most beautiful signs of spiritual growth. Because the person who no longer rushes is the one who finally begins to live. Rushing comes from a sense of lack of time, lack of energy, lack of control, lack of safety, lack of certainty. But when you live with the awareness that goodness goes before you, holds you, surrounds you, and clears the path for you, the sense of lack fades. The mind stops running ahead to scan for what might go wrong. It stands in the present moment. And this moment, because the presence of God is in it, is enough. One thing I want you to remember is that inner peace is not a fixed state. It is a choice you make again and again. Every day you will meet small challenges, a situation that pulls you tight, a piece of news that worries you, a person who hurts you, a memory that pulls you back to difficult days. And each time you have the chance to choose again. Choose fear, or choose goodness. Choose reaction, or choose peace. Choose instinct, or choose inner guidance. Peace is not built from the first choice. It is built from the repetition of hundreds of choices, until your mind naturally leans toward goodness the way a tree leans toward light. You may have felt it before, a tiny second when your mind suddenly opens, as if a door inside you unlocked. A moment when you realize that no matter what is happening, you can still breathe. A moment when what you fear no longer controls you. That moment is a spark. And if you nourish that spark with steady practice, it becomes a dawn in your life. When peace becomes the way you walk, the world is no longer a battlefield. It becomes a place to receive, to grow, to love, and to create. Not because everything is easy, but because everything can be walked through with a bright mind. Letting go when the old must fall, so the new can appear in the spiritual journey. There is a phase many people misunderstand. It is the phase where everything seems to grow more chaotic before it becomes clearer. The phase where you begin practicing peace, yet old thoughts rise even stronger. The phase where you try to live lightly, yet the heavy pieces of your past suddenly step out from the shadows. Many people think this means they are going the wrong way. But the truth is the opposite. When light enters, old dust becomes visible. Not to frighten you, but so you can see it and let it fall away. A man named Charles once told me that after a few weeks of practicing the golden key, his mind felt more chaotic than ever. Memories he thought he had forgotten resurfaced. Emotions he had stored for years rose up. Fears he believed he had overcome reappeared in his dreams. He said, "I think I am getting worse." But as I listened, I knew he was not getting worse. He was being cleaned. People often think healing feels gentle, but sometimes healing begins with disruption. When you wipe a mirror covered in years of dust, the first thing that happens is dust rising into the air. But that is not the mirror getting dirtier. It is dust leaving the surface. When your mind begins turning toward goodness, what no longer belongs will rise to be released. Not because it is strong, but because the light has become stronger. Charles told me he did not want to face those old memories. They made him feel weak. I told him that feeling weak is not a sign of going wrong. It is a sign that you are looking at what you once ran from. And when you look at it in the light, it no longer has the same power. What once hurt you was only a shadow enlarged by darkness. When the light shines on it, its real size is smaller than you thought. Few people understand this. Before something new can enter, the old must leave. The inner life is like a room. If the room is filled with old boxes, you cannot place anything new inside. For order to come in, disorder must step out. For peace to settle, old fears must dissolve. Not by force, by seeing and releasing. A woman named Grace once told me she felt like she was falling apart during her first weeks of practice. She said, "It feels like everything I have hidden under the rug is coming into the open. I do not want to see it. I want it to disappear." I told her that no one heals by covering what they fear. People heal when they look at it with the eyes of truth. Not the eyes of judgment, not the eyes of guilt, but the eyes of light. Grace asked how she could know that this would pass. I said, "Everything that rises is rising because it is leaving you. What still clings remains hidden. What is about to dissolve appears. What is ready to fall steps into the light, so you can see it once, then let it go. You do not need to fight it. You only need to recognize it no longer belongs." Many people think letting go must be a forceful act, but letting go is a softening. The old cannot leave when you are rigid. It leaves when you soften, when you stop resisting, when you stop holding on to the old story, when you no longer search for reasons to suffer over what is past, when you allow yourself not to carry what does not belong to you. I have seen this in my own life. There were seasons when I thought I was moving backward, but when I look back, those were the times I let go the most. I let go of the need to always be right. Let go of the habit of self-blame. Let go of the tension of trying to control everything. Let go of old beliefs I once thought were foundations. And when they fell away, my mind felt wider, deeper, lighter. Not because I became someone new, but because what covered me had disappeared. One important thing to remember is that letting go does not happen in a day. It comes in layers, in waves, in pieces. And each time it comes, you may feel a little unsteady. But that unsteadiness is a sign of movement, not collapse. Imagine standing in a forest and watching yellow leaves fall. Leaves do not fall because the tree is weak. They fall because a new season is arriving. Your mind is the same. When old things fall away, it is not a sign of loss. It is a sign of a new season. When Charles understood this, he began to breathe more softly when old memories appeared. He no longer feared them. He looked at them with light. And what had weighed on him for years needed only moments to lose its power. Not because it vanished, but because it no longer clung to him. Spiritual maturity is not about gathering more. It is about releasing more. Not about becoming heavier, but becoming simpler. not about carrying more burdens, but about setting them down. And if right now in your life something old is stepping forward, look at it gently and know this. You may not be falling apart. You may be being cleared. You may be being prepared for a new season. When challenges come, which eyes will you choose to read them with in every spiritual journey? There will always be moments when life sends an unexpected challenge. It might be bad news, a heavy conversation, an unwanted change of direction, or a disruption that forces you to pause. People often call these things problems. But in truth, what stands before you is simply a doorway. And what determines whether you step into darkness or light is not the doorway itself, but the eyes with which you look at it. I have met many people who believe challenges are signs of bad luck or some kind of punishment. But the more I listened and watched, the clearer one truth became. Challenges do not come to take from you. They come to help you see yourself more clearly. They come to open a new angle that you were too restless to notice before. They come to lead you deeper into truth. Not so you suffer more, but so you become brighter. A woman named Helen once told me that her life fell apart in just 1 week. Trouble at work. Her son got sick. Financial plans collapsed. She said she could not understand why everything hit at once. I asked her a simple question. Which eyes are you using to read this challenge? She became quiet, because until that moment she had only been reading it with fear. And when you read with fear, a challenge becomes darkness. But when you read with truth, a challenge becomes a lamp. I told Helen that every challenge carries a reminder that you can no longer live the way you used to, a reminder that you are ready for a deeper level of growth, a reminder that what you have been relying on may need to be replaced with something stronger, not control, but trust, not fear, but the presence of goodness. Helen listened, but she said she felt exhausted. I understood. People are not exhausted because the challenge is too big. They are exhausted because they interpret the challenge in a way that drains them. When you see a challenge as a threat, your body tightens, your mind strains, your heart closes. But when you see a challenge as a reminder, you can breathe. You are not pulled down. You are lifted. I invited Helen to ask a different question. Not why is this happening, but what is this here to shift? What in me needs to loosen? What in me needs to grow clearer? What in me is being healed? When she asked that question, her mind stopped sliding toward negativity. It paused. It observed. It began to read the challenge as a mirror, reflecting what she needed to understand about herself. And when she changed the way she read the challenge changed shape. One morning, Helen said she realized something important. For years, she had been trying to carry everything alone, afraid that if she loosened her grip, everything would collapse. And this challenge came to tell her that she does not have to hold the world together. She only needs to take one step at a time, place her trust in the right source, and let spiritual guidance open the way. This did not change her circumstances overnight, but it changed the person walking through them. And a changed person walks differently, with peace instead of panic, with trust instead of control, with clarity instead of distorted interpretation. And when the inner person changes, the outer world begins to shift. I have gone through many challenges myself, and I learned something that never changes. Every challenge carries a lesson that cannot be avoided. Not a lesson about suffering, but a lesson about light. Not a lesson about loss, but a lesson about how to walk in the order of goodness. There was a time when I was under intense pressure, and I asked myself a question I still carry today. If I look at this with light, what do I see? If I look at this with trust, what is it teaching me? If I look at this with truth, what door is it opening? And each time I asked, the darkness shrank, the light grew. Not because the challenge disappeared, but because I was looking with different eyes. You can do this for yourself too. When a challenge comes, pause for one breath, just one. Ask yourself, am I reading this through fear or through truth? You may be surprised how one question can open a window of clarity inside you. And now I want to ask you, in the most recent challenge you faced, did you read it with the eyes of fear or with the eyes of truth? Thank you for being present in this journey. Your presence is what gives these words meaning. Me and the journey of gratitude, when the heart learns to see life through light. Across many years of observing the movements of the human mind, I began to notice something fascinating. Some people do not seem to have anything more favorable than others, yet they live gently, deeply, with little that can shake them. And some people who appear to have everything still carry a quiet, cold wind inside. For years I wondered what created that difference. And the answer did not come through a sudden revelation, but through countless days of living in stillness. Gratitude. To me, gratitude is not a pretty phrase, not a simple form of optimism, not the effort of forcing yourself to see everything positively. Gratitude in the spiritual life, I have learned, is a state of the heart, a state that helps you see life through light instead of shadow. When you are grateful, you do not change what happens. You change how your heart touches what happens. I remember a long season when I felt I always had to do more, to become better, to achieve something greater. And that pressure slowly stole the gentleness of my days. I looked at life through everything missing, everything unfinished, everything unresolved. Until one morning, sitting alone as sunlight passed through the window, I realized something simple. I had never stopped to be grateful for what already was. I was grateful because I was breathing. I was grateful because I could still feel. I was grateful because my heart, despite many storms, was still soft. I was grateful because I could see beauty even in a dust particle drifting through sunlight. And something strange happened in that moment. Not life-changing. I changed from the inside, from my way of seeing. Many people think gratitude is a reaction when life is good. But to me, gratitude is a choice. You are grateful not because life gives you what you want. You are grateful because you recognize that beneath everything, a gentle order of goodness is guiding you, whether you see it or not. There were days I felt lost, the road ahead unclear, the future dim, worries pushing against each other inside my chest. But in those days I learned something. When I am grateful, fear cannot stay beside me for long. When I am grateful, my mind opens to a new path. When I am grateful, my heart softens, and everything soft can be guided. I once met a man named Patrick. He said his life felt like one difficulty after another. He said he had nothing to be grateful for. And I told him gratitude does not begin with something big. It begins with noticing something small. Grateful that you have another chance to live today. Grateful that you can stand up again after the times you fell. Grateful that goodness is opening a way for you in ways you cannot yet see. Patrick tried. He did not believe immediately, but he tried. Each morning he wrote down one small thing he was grateful for. One day, it was the light through the window. Another day, it was a few quiet minutes. Another was a simple conversation he had overlooked before. And a few weeks later, he said he saw his life through different colors. Not because it became easier, but because he finally saw the light he used to miss. I have lived through that, and I know gratitude is a deep form of healing. It does not need grand words. It does not need force. It only needs presence. Your presence in the moment you are living. Gratitude pulls you out of the past. Gratitude pulls you out of the future. Gratitude brings you back to the present where truth always is. In the hardest days of my life, I closed my eyes and said one simple sentence. Thank you that I do not walk this road alone. And that was enough for me to breathe again. Enough for me to stand. Enough for me to remember that no matter how many challenges there are, I am always being guided. Gratitude does not remove darkness, but it helps you see the lamp. Gratitude does not erase every problem, but it changes your position in relation to the problem. Gratitude does not create something new, but it opens the door for the new to enter. And today, as I write this, I want to tell you what I once told myself years ago. You do not need a perfect life to be grateful. You only need to look a little deeper. Look past the noise. Look past the fear. Look past the tiredness, and you will see something bright, even if very small, is already there. When I put God first, everything else became lighter. Looking back over the long path of my life, I realized there was one very small moment that changed everything in me. Not a major event, not something dramatic that shook the world around me. Just a quiet moment inside when I let myself sit down, breathe deeply, and see that I had placed so many things in the first position of my life, except for the one who truly belonged there. I had once put fear in the first position, and I lived like someone running away from danger. I had once put old wounds in the first position, and they shaped every choice I made. I had once put control in the first position, and I lived in the tension of someone always watching, always preparing. All of that exhausted me, not because life was too heavy, but because I was carrying the wrong thing in my heart. One morning I sat in silence and asked myself a simple question. Who is standing in the first place of my mind? And the moment I asked it, I knew the answer was not God. I believed in him, loved him, looked for his guidance. But I had placed him after my worries, after my thoughts, after my calculations. I let small things stand in the place only he deserves. And because of that, my life was always unsteady. In that quiet moment, I did only one thing. I put God back in the first place. Not through a complicated prayer, not through a ritual, not through a grand promise, but through a simple thought. Father first, everything else after. And something beautiful happened. Not the world changing, but the weight in me dropped by half. Because when I put him first, I no longer had to play the role of someone holding up their entire life. I no longer had to predict everything. I no longer had to find solutions with my own strength. I no longer lived as someone trying to hold up the sky. I only needed to take the next step, and he opened the road. I remember meeting a man named Matthew. He worked in a stressful environment and always felt he had to push himself to avoid falling behind. He said he was tired because he always had to worry. Worry something bad would happen. Worry no one would help. Worry that if he did not control things, everything would collapse. I looked at him and saw myself from years before. I told him he was not tired because life was hard. He was tired because his mind stood in the wrong place. He put fear in the first position and placed God at the end. And when you do that, you lose the order of peace. I told him about the moment I put God first. I said it did not turn my life into a straight road, but it helped me walk curved roads with a steady heart. Not because the road was easy, but because I knew I was not walking alone. Months later, Matthew returned and said that simple sentence had changed him. He told me that every morning before doing anything, he closed his eyes and said, "Father first, me after." And on every day he began that way, his mind carried a strength he never had before. Not the strength of tension, the strength of trust. I understood that deeply, because I had lived it. When I put him first, everything else found its rightful place. Fear stepped back. Worry shrank. Old memories dissolved. Chaos found order. Not because I became better, but because I no longer carried everything by myself. Someone once asked me, "How do you know you have truly put God first?" And I answered with the simplest truth. When He is first, you do not panic about the future. You are not dragged into the past. You do not feel you have to control everything. You walk, but not in a rush. You live, but not in fear. You breathe, but not in haste. You face things, but not trembling. That is how you know He is in the right place. Someone else asked, "Does this make life easier?" And I said honestly, not always easier, but always brighter. Because when you carry light in your heart, darkness can no longer lead you. And today, as I write these closing lines of this chapter, I want to tell you something small that I hope you keep with you for a long time. You are not meant to carry your life alone. You are not meant to hold everything. You are not meant to predict the road. You only need to put in place the one who holds the road. When God is in the first position of your heart, everything becomes lighter. Not because everything changes, but because you walk in a kind of order the world cannot shake. You walk with a peace that does not come from this world. And because of that, nothing in this world can take it from you.